Welcome everyone to today's Qesher event, which is a book club in which we're going to present Sweet Malida. It's very nice to have you all here. Just for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we want to share very briefly about Qesher. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers, and Sebastian is the other one. You can find us here both under the name Qesher. We are located in Budapest, Hungary, and Qesher, which means connection in Hebrew, is a project we started 6 years ago now with the mission to share Jewish history, Jewish heritage, the lives of Jewish communities from all over the world. So those who have attended our other type of lectures, we normally do virtual tours or events focusing on one specific cities or countries or communities' Jewish heritage. And from this initial programming grew out the book club series because we've realized that there are so many authors around the world who write books in these themes, who share their stories or either fiction or nonfiction or poetry, as it's going to be today. They use books, they use literature to share about something very similar that I just described about Jewish life around the world. And we're very happy to welcome today Zilka Joseph, who is the author of Sweet Malida, which is going to be the book that we will focus on today. Zilka has authored 6 collections and been nominated for several awards, including PEN, Pushcart, and the American Book Award. Her work is influenced by India and Western cultures, her Bene Israel roots. She has been a featured reader at international literary festivals, been widely published, has appeared on NPR Michigan Radio, and been interviewed on podcasts such as the Rattlecast or Culturico. The University of Michigan awarded her a Zell Fellowship, the Michael Guterman Prize, and the Elsie Choi Lee Scholarship. Her latest collection, Sweet Malida, was published in the US in 2024 and the international edition in 2025. So we're very happy to have Zilka here with us. She's going to share both a bit about her Bene Israel roots and both about the poetry that represent these roots, both her immediate ancestry and also reaching back ancient roots hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So I'll pass the word now to Zilka to share about this with us a little bit. And if there are any questions, please feel free to use the chat. And of course, after her presentation, we'll open up for Q&A and for comments and questions and thoughts.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Dora and Sebastian. It's an absolute privilege to be part of Qesher and part of your wonderful, wonderful network. Thank you for giving me this platform to reach out internationally to people who are interested in literature and particularly of Jewish content and heritage. So, as Dora mentioned, I'll give you a little bit of a background of the history of the Ben Israel, as not everybody may be familiar with it, and it'll be a fitting sort of introduction to some of the poems in my collection. I've chosen poems from the book that give short descriptions of some of our customs and our rituals, and then I've sort of will reach out more into the personal subject matter towards the end of the program. But my hope always when I present, wherever I'm invited to present, whether in the US or the UK or in India, and I hope to travel more and talk about my heritage and my culture, because more and more I find there is very little knowledge about the Jews of India, and particularly the fact that the Ben Israel have an ancient connection with India. So that's where I'm going to begin my little introduction to the Ben Israel, the history of the Ben Israel. Um, one of the most popular theories, and one passed down, I think, by oral history more than recorded history, is that the Ben Israel were people who came from perhaps around the land of Judea in ships, which were shipwrecked on the west coast of India. If you look at the wonderful map that Dora provided for me, there is a little red star on the left side of the map of India. That's the Konkan coast. It's called the Konkan coast. It's to the south of Bombay. And that is the area where two ships, it is said, were shipwrecked. And most of the people or the families traveling in those ships passed in that storm. But it is part of mythology, perhaps, or part of history when we say 7 men and 7 women were supposed to have survived and were rescued by the villagers who lived in the area. And part of that story is that they were brought into these villages and allowed to live and live freely using their own customs. And these people integrated into the lives of Indian villages and lived among the Hindus and later on even the Muslims. But what was interesting about the Indian Jews is that they kept 3 or 4 or about 5 of their customs, which later helped other people to identify them as Jews. So things like the Shabbat, Passover, and most importantly, the Kashrut laws. They kept kosher. And one of the poems I will read to you later will reflect this. And one of the reasons the Ben Israel are called Indian Jews is because we adapted to life in these villages, and our dress codes and our jewelry and some of our customs were very, very much part of this culture. But despite that, we kept, we recited the Shema, and over hundreds of years, much was forgotten, but they clung to certain uh, rites and rituals and customs, which were the basis of their Jewishness, and that itself is a very interesting story. There are other theories of their arrival, but since my book basically uses this early arrival of the shipwreck in the Konkan coast, I've put this date up on the screen. Dora, could we move to the next? Yes. So now we are talking about this area in Maharashtra, Konkan, where these ships were have been shipwrecked. And it is said that in this area in Naugaon is where these are all real villages and towns in in Maharashtra. If you visit, take a Jewish tour, they will take you to visit these places. And this is a monument that's been set up in memory of the people who are buried here and the people who died and were washed away in this storm. And this is this village of Naugaon. And around this monument is the actual original graveyard of the people who passed and who I consider to be my ancestors. I was very lucky last year to visit this area sometime at the end of January. And it was a very moving experience because I was actually witnessing these grave sites, which were surrounded by rock. They were just flattened rock and nothing much else that was left. And I realized that, these were people who were fleeing. So for me, there were children's graves, there were smaller graves, there were, which I would say were men's graves and women's graves and children's graves. And that made me quite convinced that these were families that were were definitely fleeing persecution. So when we think of the date 175 BCE, we're going back 2000 years. So the connection of my ancestors to the land of India goes back 2000 years. And 175 BCE is the time when the Greek overlord Antiochus Epiphanes is the one who ruled that region. And it is during that time and that time of persecution, perhaps, many of these people were fleeing on ships. Of course, I do believe there must have been some trade connections as well. Maybe before that, there's been very long histories of maritime voyages and trade. But this particular episode, if we go back to 175 BCE, then we connect it with the time of the Greek overlord. So it seems sort of fitting to see that perhaps this is when the very first wave of Jews arrived on the shores of India. Dora, can I see the next one? I want to show the picture. So this is what some of the graves look like. And when I first went there, I was sort of expecting something like a flat surface, but then I realized this must be worn down if it's like this ancient. These are the rocks that they must have placed around the people who have passed. And it was actually quite a moving experience when I walked. They're quite haphazardly laid. It seems almost like, in haste, in a hurry. Perhaps, the shore is not very far from where the gravesite is. And this cemetery is currently in use. So people who live in the Raigad district of Maharashtra, where many of the Ben Israel families still live, they can still be buried in this plot. But this is just the section that shows some of the grave sites that I saw when I was there. There are other theories that perhaps they came in 70 CE with the destruction of the Second Temple. There's another theory that perhaps they came in around the 10th century BCE, at King Solomon's times. Many of his sailors and fleets did a lot of travel. And then there are a lot of connections that people make with the lost tribes of India. So all these are very intriguing theories, and perhaps they had influences from all these various times as well. But the 175 BC theory is one that fascinates me as a writer. And so that's part of what I have shared in my book and created stories and scenarios around that. So with that, I think I could read the first poem that I would like to begin with. And before I read that, I'd just like to mention that our people who settled in these villages mainly were oil pressers. So one of the theories that people said that perhaps they already knew oil pressing from wherever their origins were from. And perhaps that's why many of them became oil pressers. And they were known as Shanwar Telis. Shanwar meaning Saturday, Telis meaning oil person or oilman. And they did not work on Fridays. So they observed the Shabbat, and Shanwar being Saturday, they did not work on Saturday. So that was another major factor that identified them as Jews much later when people began to question who these people were and where they've come from. So, the first poem I'd love to share with you is my re envisioning, really, of what it might have been like after the storm, after the shipwrecks and people scattered on the shores. And also because in poetry, too, we are very specific about how we have line breaks, the stanzas, the flow of words, the patterns. Dora has created visuals for you right throughout for you to follow. And one of the things, if you notice, there are these alternating stanzas. There are two lines, two lines, two lines, and I'm trying to give the impression of the flow of the ocean, the back and forth, the wave and the shore, and then the sense of being thrown onto this land, and then that land becoming their own. And of course, when I say angels of Konkan, I'm also sort of visualizing who were these people who came out of the villages to pick up these people just stranded, half dead, lying on the beach. The angels of Konkan. Nagaon, Maharashtra is where it is believed the ancestors of the Ben Israel were shipwrecked and where the ruined cemetery exists. And that's the visual that we offered you earlier. From tumbled sands and shattered bark, blurred shadows dragged us. Where were we? They dried our battered bodies, bound our wounds, clothed us in woven cotton, fed us warm food that we could not name then. They fed with their hands, and as Elijah ate of bread and flesh the ravens gave him, so also we ate and drank of the cool water brought from brooks. Who were these healers? Then in fields of grass near the sea, we buried our dead, the ones we found. Where are they now? Set gravestones to remember. And they let us pray as we wished, and giving thanks to Adonai, learned the craft of oil pressers. Or did our tribe know it already? Ate what our laws permitted, and praising this vast green land, its rich soil, its rivers, its carts, its grains, its fish and fowl, we blessed the hearts and the living hands of the villagers who saved us. So this is a sort of tribute, but it's also a way of trying to reimagine what it must have been like to reinvent your life so completely. And I wanted to mention one more line from this poem. I say, they let us pray as we wished. And this is something that's very important because the Jews in India were very much part of the fabric of the country and were not persecuted. So it's a very, very important part of our history and our relationship with people in India and our lives growing up there. So that's just to give you a little bit of a segue into the history. And I think, Dora, will I go to the next one? Yes, thank you. So I wanted to explain to you a little bit about the deep connection that the Ben Israel have with Prophet Elijah. If you remember, I have already mentioned Elijah in this particular poem. But there is a pilgrimage point in Maharashtra, in a little village called Sagav, where they have this rock, and they believe that it is there's a split mark in the middle, where they believe that Elijah, while on his celestial journey to the heavens, actually landed in this region and landed on this rock, which is why his chariot wheel has caused a crack in the rock. And then there are one or two like rough structures where they believe those were actually the hoof prints of the celestial horses that were drawing the carriage. And if you have already looked at the cover of my book, you will see a shadowy image of a chariot on the left top corner. So that theme flows through this book. Some people believe that Elijah appeared to the people uh, when during the storm. There are several popular theories and images of Elijah. And one of them we will see in the next image, if we can move to that one. Let's just move to the picture of yes, I just wanted the picture of the chariot. This is commonly available online. You'll see it on calendars and in many, many, many homes. So I just wanted to give you that sense of connection that people have with Prophet Elijah. And then I begin my book with a tribute to him and to what is called the Malida ceremony, which I will also talk about. So we have these beautiful bowls of fruit and poha, which is a flattened rice, as you can see from that image there. And it's basically a celebration of Thanksgiving, of any form of Thanksgiving. We dedicate it to Prophet Elijah, but we have these ceremonies for anything that is joyous. So if we get a new job, we bought a new house, somebody's got married, and here's a picture of me demonstrating my version of celebrating a Malida ceremony with some wonderful people who invited me to their home to it was a women's group, book group that invited me, and it was a lovely experience of putting this all together and showing them, you could use local fruits and dates, and but the poha was beautifully made by the lady of the house before I arrived, so it wasn't the soggy. It becomes soggy very quickly, but she did a beautiful job of helping me assemble all of this. So thank you for those images. Dora, should we go back to the poem? Thank you. And many of you know this chant, the Eliyahu Hanabi chant. So maybe we'll ask one of you to sing it if some of you would like to volunteer when I finish reading. So what I'd like to explain here is that the Malida ceremony itself is this wonderful dedication to Prophet Elijah. And I have tried in this poem to echo the way the prayer goes. It's just like we do in the Shabbat. We celebrate the flowers, we celebrate all the senses. And that's how I have arranged this poem. And then the other poem I will read is Sweet Malida, where I actually describe the dish itself and my personal connection. So, Eliyahu Hanavi, the Malida ceremony of the Ben Israel. Give thanks to the prophet Elijah, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hanavi. Let us heap the sugar sprinkled poha, tall as a pyramid, mixed with shredded coconut, precious dried fruits and nuts, scented with the most fragrant of spices. Oh, Elijah, can you taste the nutmeg, the cardamom, the freshly sliced mangoes, guava, chiku, apples, and bananas arranged like garlands? Can you see the pomegranate seeds dotting the top of the rice, bursting sweet juice and tartness? Can you smell the red rose petals scattered everywhere, the cups of cloves? Accept our thanks. Let us say baracha over each item, ha'etz, ha'adama, the fruit that grows on trees of hardwood, the fruit that grows on soft trunks of fiber. Ful chibaraka, flowers, the flowers that give us so much pleasure. Join us. Descend in your fiery chariot where it ascended once as it left a cleft in the rock at Sagav village, where pilgrims come to Alibag, the soil our wandering ancestors were blown onto by storm. They reached land, survived. Feast with us, we humbly ask, O granter of wishes, as we chant our gratitude, our prayer, words of Malida Chibaracha, circle our offerings and rise up to meet you in the clouds. Touch your flaming chariot, your horses of fire. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hanavi. So that is my sort of invocation as my first poem. And then the second poem in the collection is Sweet Malida. So these images should give you an idea of how to assemble the simplest of Malidas in your home. Basically, the poha, any fruits you like, fruits and nuts and dates would be important, and a little bit of cardamom, sugar, and coconut, as you will see in my poem. So if you follow my poem, you can follow the recipe of it as well. And poem Sweet Malida. a mix of water, softened, flattened rice, sugar, dried fruits, and nuts, was a dish made for Shabbat or for breaking our fasts. Cooling, light on the palate and to the body and the spirit, it was welcome in the heat of day or night. We had many foods in common with our Muslim, Christian, and Hindu neighbors, and we often celebrated together their festivals or ours. I relished particularly fresh coconut, the regional staple, its milk or its flesh added to almost every dish. But this was to me the best way to eat it, finely grated by my mother's hands, left unsweetened and sprinkled haphazardly on the Malida, juicy threads with a fleck of stubborn brown kernel here and there that sometimes crunched in your teeth like sand, and you winced and you swallowed it, knowing there was no simpler or purer or truer form than that. So as you can see, there's a variety of food images in my book where I remember certain dishes that I watched my grandmother and my mother making. I have prose poems as well in this collection. Unfortunately, there's one I would love to read. It's a little too long, where we actually talk about making besan laddus. There's laddus or this particular sweet that was made by my grandmother and my mother. And there are some photographs that we will share with you as well. Um, I come to another part of our history, which is our connection with the Jews of Cochin. And if you look at the map, the Ben Israel community is shown up higher up on the west coast. And then the Malabar coast is what we see below the Kerala section, right? So that is where the history of the Kochini Jews begin. And even with the Kochini Jews, it's a very interesting and complex history because there were more than one wave of Jews who came, Sephardi Jews that settled in the area. So just a very quick connection here, because there is a part of our history which mentions David Rahabi, who came from the Malabar coast. And when he heard about the existence of the Ben Israel community, there was this discovery of our community that people were amazed that, these people were saying Jewish prayers, they followed the Shabbat, they circumcised their male children, they observed kosher, the kashrut laws. So the Kochini Jews we had lost all our scriptures and prayers and everything, but these people had come with all their traditions and the Torah and all of that. So David Rahabi, it is said, came to visit, came to look and find us and see who were these people who lived in the Konkan area, and whether there was, who were they, how was they were following all these customs. So the story goes is that he arrived and he tested them to see what they would do, and then he declared that, perhaps these were people who had ancient connections. So I'm just going to read that little epigraph that I already have on my poem. Can I just go back 1 minute, Dora? I'll read that. Because the mythological David Rahabi is said to have come in 1000 CE, 1000 CE, but the real David Ezekiel Rahabi existed between 1694 and 1772 in Cochin. So it's perhaps the dates seemed a bit fuzzy there, but it is true that he came and then he was the one responsible for bringing scholars and teaching uh, the religion and the scriptures to these communities, my ancestors. So now I can go to the next section. So this poem is a little mix of prose and poetry, as you will see. It plays a little bit with rhythm and sound and storytelling. This book really is a very accessible book of poems full of stories and memories. And this is the test that Rahabi is supposed to have set the people, and particularly the women, and watch them cook. As legend goes, oh, I've already read that. So, um, is there one page missing, Dora? I think there's a few lines from the beginning missing. That's all right. I'll read it, so that's
I
fine.
think this part I copied the here, the David
Yeah,
Rahabi.
that was the epigraph. That's all right. I'll read it. I'll read the first part, and then they can follow from the second section. No problem. No problem. So this poem is called Not One Fish. So David Rahabi of Malabar traveled north up the west coast and encountered the Shanwar Telis, who had taken the names of the villagers for their own. He wondered at the oil pressers and farmers, others who made a living, excuse me, by other rural professions. These women and men who had lived as a caste among the locals, so long unknown, this mysterious community, so apart from the urban world. They did not call themselves Jews, nor did they know that word. But he was impressed by the ancient rituals they practiced, the powerful prayer they remembered and used for all occasions, the Shema Israel, which had kept them together. And now you can follow there. As legend goes, he asked the women to prepare a feast for him from the bounty of the Arabian Sea. Would they pick crab and shrimp, mussel, clam, or bottom feeders? No, not one fish, not one fish without fins and scales had they chosen. Not one fish without fins or scales was served. They brought him white-fleshed fish like paplet, and oily fish like bangra and tarali, fresh and flavorful and salty as the waters that brought the Ben Israel hence from the land of Solomon and David. He knew then they kept kosher, a word they did not recall, just kept a simple faith in the God of Abraham. So this gives you a little nugget of history, which I have tried to do throughout the book. And there are some a little bit quirky and fun poems as well, where I bring in the raven because we talk about Elijah and the raven and Noah and the raven. So there are a lot of wonderful metaphors that play through the book. Of course, the main metaphor is also maritime, the sea image, migration, journey, and the journey of the soul. And there is a poem that has a little bit of humor as well. It's called Manhu, Manhu, and it's a play on manna, which is supposed to have fallen from the heaven during the Exodus, right, when Moses was in the desert. So just giving you little fillers here where you can have poems that also are a little playful besides the other more serious, more narrative poems. Um, so just a few pictures that I have saved from a lot of our pictures and our possessions and belongings that we lost. I used to live in Calcutta, the flat where I lived most of my life, and my parents grew old and died. We've lost a lot of our things from that home. So these are a few that other relatives have sent me and are very, very precious. So this is a beautiful picture of my mother and father being married in Mumbai. Uh, so this was 1950, I think, their wedding. Uh, yes, and then this one is a particularly one that I'm very attached to. I don't know if you can see if I hold up a book. I have my books, Sharp Blue Search of Flame, which is um, published by Wayne State University Press. And I gave them this photograph, and they were able to incorporate my mother's eyes into the top of my book. And so it's very, very precious to me. And this is an engagement photograph of hers. So they grew up in Karachi, but moved back to Bombay. The whole family moved back to Bombay much before partition. And we lived in the Shivaji Park area of Bombay. And this is a picture in the Shivaji Park house in Bombay with my grandmother Hannah and me as a little girl. And it is in this house where some of the dishes that I mention in my book we were actually made. Then we moved to Calcutta when I was a little older, and then I spent the rest of my life living in Calcutta. So I'm also very influenced by Bengali culture and living in Calcutta. So you'll find references to not just Bombay, but Calcutta and the history of various things in Calcutta as well, as you'll see in a poem that I will read a little later. So this is one of the few pictures I have of my grandmother and myself. And one of the things I try to do in this book is to honor the women in our lives, our mothers and grandmothers, without whom we would not have been fed. The feeding, the eating, the nourishment that we have because of the women in our family, and the traditions that carry on because of the women in our family. So, this particular poem is called Pantum for Chikcha Halwa, and I wanted to have this poem in the book because halwa is so universal. Every culture seems to have a form of halwa. So I began to imagine what must have been an early form that my ancestors might have had. Maybe it was a sesame, some form of a sesame halwa back where they originated from. And then how did that evolve? And then ultimately, what is our Ben Israel halwa made of? It's made from chick. It's an extract of soaked wheat. So, and because the process is so laborious, I wanted to also symbolize women's hands, hard work, and the repetition of the stirring and the churning and everything worked beautifully with this form called the pantum. It's a Malaysian, an Indonesian form of poetry which uses repeated lines. So it becomes almost like a song where you keep repeating the lines. So I'm going to just read this poem to you, and I want you to listen carefully to how the lines move. Just a minute, I seem to have lost it on my page here. I have several other poems on food, which I think you will thoroughly enjoy. So I hope you will get a copy of this book and do write to me. I would love to hear from you. Pantum for Chik Chahalwa. Whose hands worked hard to make this halwa? Whose hands soaked the mounds of wheat? How we waited 3 days and nights, how cheek was extracted from grain. Whose hands soaked the mounds of wheat, knew each step of the recipe, how to squeeze the cheek from grain, to slowly boil thick beads of juice. Did they learn each step of the recipe from a new culture, from a new land? To slowly boil the thick beads of juice. Did they miss loved ones left behind from a new culture, from a new land? Did they taste their ancestors' food? Did they miss loved ones left behind, those lost in the deluge, shipwrecked? Did their tongues taste their ancestors' food? Was this so different from sweets of home? Those lost in the deluge and wreck would never come back to life. So very different from sweets of home. Sugar, coconut milk, pink, the colored pink thickening. Those lost in the deluge, shipwrecked. Would their spirits whisper old recipes? Sugar tinted, rose coconut milk thickening, tired arms, bated breath, silky cubes cooling. Do spirits whisper old recipes in a new land, new life, new history? Tired arms, bated breath, silky cubes cooling, sprinkled with poppy seed, slivered nuts. New land, new life, new history. Food and ways you made your own, sprinkled with poppy seed, slivered nuts. How we waited, how we waited. The food and ways you made your own, your hands working hard to make this halwa. So I try to bring the whole story round from the origins to where we are now. And I try to link in the book not just ancient history and the down the ages of how we have progressed, but current life, current migration, and my own life, my having migrated from India to the US where I live now. And I hand you over now to Dora, who I will chat with a little bit before I read some more.
Thank you so much, Zilka. I think now we all have a much better understanding of both the Bene Israel culture, but I also find it fascinating how you play with the tastes and the senses and the actual sensation that happens when you eat, and then you manage to kind of give that to us through these poems.
Thank
And well, you now just answered briefly a question, which was about where you live, and this is something that you haven't mentioned yet, but I think you speak about it a bit in
you.
the
Right,
this
right,
last poem that you're going to
right,
read, that you don't actually live in India anymore, and I
right,
think that is part of the longing and the nostalgia and this
right. Right.
connection that we can sense through these poems.
So much of it is trying to bring to life. That's what I describe when I talk about. I have a lot of poems about loss and my parents in my other books, this being my sixth book. The different subject matter with interlinking themes, right, throughout all of my books: birds, histories, food, nature. These are all very common themes in my work. And I still am very connected to my friends and my students. I taught for many years in India before I came to the US. So my connections with India, Calcutta particularly, are still very, very deep. And I moved from India first to Chicago and then to Michigan. So right now I live in Ann Arbor. I teach here privately mostly. I do editing for a lot of writers who want their manuscripts worked on, and so we can get them published. I also work with a range of writing. So whether it's poetry or memoir or novels, nonfiction, fiction, I coach and I help people to get published. But I live in Ann Arbor, and then I travel around to give talks as I'm invited. So I would be very happy to come to your town if you would wish to invite me.
Thank you. And I think it will be nice if you did read a little bit of the leaf boat that you mentioned.
Sure.
What I find or what I found fascinating when we discussed about this and I
Right,
read it, is that a lot of times I think it's hard to combine the modern and the old, and
right,
somehow people feel that okay, if I write about the ancient or the old and the nostalgia, then it somehow
right,
stays there. And you mentioned many times how you use the metaphor of the sea, of the ocean.
right,
But
right.
in this one, if I remember correctly, you also have an airplane.
Right. Anything
And
to do with journey, right? The physical,
yeah,
the
and
emotional, geographical, historical, all the symbolism works together of the soul's journey, right? As we
yeah.
go through. Each is like a life. Each one is like a
Yeah,
new.
like we may not migrate as our
Right.
ancient ancestors
Right.
anymore, but an airplane can be equally
Absolutely.
powerful
Right.
as a metaphor or as a
Sure.
way to express the journey that we
Right.
take. So So I think it will be nice if you read a
Yep,
little bit also of this
sure,
one,
sure.
and then we'll go
So
into questions.
absolutely. So, my book is basically divided into like two sections, and then the center section has this very long poem called Leaf Boat. And there's a lot of symbolism with the leaf boat itself, but the word boat is supposed to symbolize the journey, not just physical, but like emotional, geographical, historical. And I bring in, it's probably one of the more experimental poems in this collection, where it's a collection of fragments and there is no linear progression. So it leaps from time to time, age to age, situation to situation. And so I bring in the history of my grandmother, Hannah, who was widowed at a very young age with three young sons, my father being the youngest. Her husband, Aaron, or my grandfather, was a captain in the British Army, and in those days, many Ben Israel had joined the services in the government, British Navy, the Army, and also civil services. So my grandfather was a captain, he was a doctor, and he was sent to Egypt and Palestine during World War One. And when he came back, he suffered from something that they call shell shock, but it could have been different form of PTSD. But then later on, my uncle did some research and they found out that it was a form of MS that he ultimately passed. But he passed very, very young. So there are flashbacks and movements in this poem that I want you to just enjoy as I tell. So I begin with the Sundarbans in Bengal. Some of you may have heard it. The tiger, the Bengal tiger there is very well known. So I begin with some of the images there. In the Sundarbans, the sun is sinking, mangrove roots like ribs, fields and fields of fiddler crabs. Fishermen light kerosene torches on the deck, lock themselves in below. The boat rocks and tilts. The hurricane lantern shakes. Tiger claws break through wood. The widow's village is full. The Sundarbans is known for a widow's village because many of the husbands are honey gatherers and fishermen, and tigers are man eaters. So many of them have lost their husbands, and all the villagers live in this, the widows live in this village. The widow's village is full. Where are the fishermen, the honey gatherer husbands? I shall fear no evil in this valley of tides. We walk through the shadow of the unknown world. My third eye is the unsleeping captain of the dark. Draw the curtain. It is time. It is time. One little mouse did not escape, though it tried. Prepare for landing. Sometimes mice can turn into birds. In New York, his ship pulled out, as Dad said. My father was a marine engineer from the beginning of his apprenticeship till the 40, 50 years after he retired. And his ship was in New York when he got the message that I was born. So this section is a tribute to that. In New York, his ship pulled out, Dad said. Above the roar of engines, they shouted to him, "A girl child." West to east, the planet turns. I was born Thursday in monsoon rain. Night time, East Coast time. In Bombay, a baby opens her eyes. Throw blades of grass to the wind. Which direction? Which direction does it blow? Do not move. Do not leave your seats till the seatbelt sign goes off. So young, my parents, feeding pigeons in Trafalgar Square. How they sailed the world. Solomon, my father, king of the engine room, king of the house, king of our destiny. Sweet Mother Ruby, loving and mild, more precious to me than jewels. Their daughter prepares to leave. Next year in Jerusalem, Granny prayed, and safe return, dear husband, from Egypt's trenches. Soldiers fall all around him. Some of her letters survive, but the photos from Palestine are gone, are gone. Multifoliate lotuses open to the sun. In Bombay, how many shamas did she say? Come back, Aaron, from Britain's war. Limbs collapse with some disease. Just 36 when his father and uncles say Kaddish for him. Young Hannah in a white sari at his side. Oh, Hannah of Bandra, mother of three small sons and your 5-year-old daughter dead in her grave. Hannah alone, selling all your jewelry, your journey just beginning. In my dream, the whales are singing. Check the dorsal. This is how we identify migrants. In ancient times, my ancestors sailed east, it is said. West to east they sailed, west to east. Safe journey, soul, to the other side. Two ships wrecked on the Konkan coast. What star, what moon saved them? Who drowned in salt? Who breathed the sand? Who flailed? Who flew? Who fell? Who swam? Who dived? Whose eyes turned to pearls? Who sang to the angels of the deep? Who lived to ask the whales the story of how they were swept to shore? In my dream, the whales are singing. Check the dorsal. This is how we identify migrants. My ancestors once, a village on the Konkan coast. The third eye is the unsleeping captain of the dark. Oh, look up. Did David's star keep them alive? Shabbat lights flicker in villages. The anchor is lifting. Oh, where to now? I am so tired. I am so tired. But see, the stars are forming strange new words. A map, a compass, and you beside me. My body, a leaf boat, lamp floated on water. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really nice
Thank you, Dora.
to close this way. And now I will read a few questions that came
Sure.
in. So the first question was, how long have you lived outside of India?
I came to the US in 97, so 25 plus years. Been living here, yeah. And I moved to Ann Arbor because we came to Michigan in 2000, but I came to Ann Arbor to do my MFA at the University of Michigan, and then I moved to Ann Arbor, and which is where I live now and teach and do my editing and some of my work from there.
Thank you. The next question is, were Jewish weddings arranged per Indian custom? What are some Jewish wedding traditions?
Very good question. Thank you. So, yes, of course, being more traditional, most of the families had arranged marriages in the past. Of course, things have changed as we've evolved. And, we live in cities now, we're much more modernized, all of that. But we did retain a lot of the Indian wedding Jewish customs, basically Hindu customs, and some of the Muslim ones too. Malida is also connected to certain ritual foods made by the Muslims and the Parsis and the Hindus. So it's very interesting how these things integrate. But coming back to the wedding, there is a particular Mehndi ceremony where the henna ceremony has become very much part of a Ben Israel wedding ceremony. Many of the foods and the sweets that are used are also very, very Indian. The wearing of the sari. In later days, a lot of people chose to wear wedding gowns with a veil, but otherwise you would wear a sari. Either you would cover your head or you would also have a veil, and your hair would have flowers, you would carry flowers. So a lot of those, the Mehndi tradition is mainly, I think, the main connection that I can remember that is connected to very Indian ceremonies. Uh, a lot of singing with the bride is also very much part of the ceremonies. And there are people, wonderful women in India and in Israel who maintain what is called the Jewish kirtans. These are traditional songs sung by women. And there's a wonderful book that Anna Schultz has just published about this. She's done wonderful research about these songs. And you can actually Google them, and you might find some of these wedding songs and songs for a child's birth. And they're all in Marathi. So the prayer books in many of these synagogues, you'll have the Hebrew page, and then you'll have the page written in Marathi, because that's became our mother tongue as part of being in the on the Konkan coast and in Maharashtra. So yes, there are many similar traditions there, that are very Indian, and the jewelry and many things like that. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you. The next question was, what was the relationship between you or your community or the Bene Israel and the Jews of India of Iraqi descent?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. In fact, a lot of the time when I give a lecture on this book or the Jews or the Ben Israel, I give a little synopsis of the Ben Israel, the Kochini Jews, and then the Baghdadi Jews, because the Baghdadi Jews or the Iraqi Jews, of course, came much later. They were the much later arrival because they came with trade routes, with major trade routes from Baghdad and Aleppo, and they came in around the 18th to 19th century. So first around Bombay, and then they did interact with the Ben Israel communities who were now had moved into cities from the villages. So there was definitely an interaction, and they prayed at some of the Ben Israel synagogues. They also were buried in Ben Israel cemeteries in the beginning, but there were major families, wealthy families, who established beautiful hospitals and synagogues, and they actually built a whole culture for themselves there. They moved all the way to Calcutta, established beautiful synagogues and life there, and then from there moved on right through China, if you know the history. So there was definitely interaction in Bombay between the two communities. They later established their own beautiful synagogues and their own cemeteries. And in Calcutta too, they have, of course, now all these populations have dwindled considerably. But I have very good friends still in Calcutta who I work with. In fact, we're putting a women's writing book together with Yael Silliman and Shifra Lenton. So some of these names, some of you may recognize. So there's another wonderful book coming out sometime later, so I'll tell you about that later.
Thank you. Actually, that's one of the questions. What are you
Yeah.
working on right now?
Okay. I'm personally working on a manuscript that I had not, I was working on it before Sweet Malida, and then Sweet Malida's manuscript got accepted. So then I went with that, and I did all my travels and book tours to India and all of that. So now I've gone back to this half finished work that needed to be worked on. And a lot of the poems there are dedicated to my mother and father who have now passed away. And again, a lot of migration and journey images, maritime images as well, but a lot to do with death and loss and recovery, and my life in Calcutta as well. So I am currently working on that manuscript, hoping to get a publisher sometime. It's very difficult when you get published only in the US. You have to look for an international publisher so that your book is available in India. And actually, Sweet Malida is the only book that is internationally available and available in India. So it took a lot of work to get publishers to take my book to India. And the beautiful part about the other project that I'm talking about, Indian Jewish women's writing in India, it's being published by an Indian publisher. and should be out towards the end of this year. So I will keep you posted because that book is going to be an important milestone in the lives of Indian Jewish women. So I am privileged to be part of that book.
Thank you. And I'll read two more questions and then we
Sure.
will close with that for today. But there are so many people sharing wonderful feedback and comments. So there's a
Dora, they
question.
can always contact me through my website and my email on that website. So I'd love to hear from them, from
Yeah, of course.
everybody. Thank you for
But
listening.
I will read these last two
Sure,
questions. So
sure.
there was a question why you left India. You mentioned when, but why?
Right,
What was your
right.
purpose?
Correct. So my husband and I were working in India, in Calcutta. My husband worked for a bank. I worked for a high school. I was a high school teacher for many years. And the main reasons were economic reasons, wanting to move somewhere where we could work hard and do good things, travel a little bit, and be able to afford to enjoy our lives a little more. Both of us were love travel. We love nature, and because of my literary background, I wanted to study more and just see what life brought us. So it was very hard to leave my aged parents. It was very difficult for them to say goodbye to me and then every time I visited, it was a heartbreak, for them and for me. But both of us were very keen on uh, trying a new life and fulfilling some of our desires and dreams. So, you sacrifice on one side, but there's you win and you lose. So, well, I would not have been able to pursue some of my literary dreams also if I had not got some of these breaks and being able to study and being able to present to you and then have Dora and Sebastian invite me to this beautiful international platform. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last question is, what is the origin of the name Zilka?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And I always get a little stumped by that question. There is a little story behind it, and then maybe some of you can help me trace a little more of the history there. My parents sailed, as I mentioned, they were merchant. My father was an engineer in the Merchant Navy, Scindia Steam Navigation. Some of you may have heard of it. A lot of Ben Israel people joined the ships, as I mentioned. And on his travels, they would, of course, be traveling to Europe very often, and they would stop in Germany. And he made wonderful friends in all these places. And there was one family called the Schwarting family, who I've never traced. And they had several daughters, and their youngest daughter was named Silka, Silke. And soon after that, I was born. And they loved that name so much that they gave me, and of course, the spelling is a little different, Zilka. But I've tried to trace that name and I've found various roots to it. One of them being Slavic from the Czech Republic and that area. And they trace it to silica, as silic. And then I wondered also if there was a root with Zulekha, but I've not been able to prove any of those. So maybe some of my listeners today might be able to form a theory for me. But
Well, someone,
it's
Francine is saying
definitely a
that it's,
Slavic Jewish connection.
and Francine shared here that it's also an Iraqi name.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Is it spelled the same way? I would love to know versions of my name, but my connection with my parents who decided that, two children born and one in Europe and one in India. So thank you so much for that. There
That's
you
really
go.
nice.
That's exactly, oh, the Silky of the Scottish mythical creature. I like that
that resembles a
mythology.
seal in the water, but still
Yes.
human
You know
form on
what? Maybe
land.
I should start a new book
Oh,
with
wow. That's actually very
mythologies.
interesting because that really
Mythologies of
resonates
names.
with your
I
poetry.
love it. I love it. Thank you,
That it
Carol.
has a form in the water and it has a form on the land because
Right. Which we
you've
do as
been speaking
writers,
about
right?
the duality of land and sea.
As a writer, we do that, right? We're shape-shifting. We're moving from one form to the other. In fact, I have a book called Sparrows and Dust, which was one of my book that won an award. I have a poem there where I adapt Sufi tradition of, transforming and becoming like the bird, living like a bird. You have no home. You have a nest, but it's not yours. You sit on a branch, but it's not yours. It's not permanent. So there's that shape shifting and moving from form to form. And I've reinvented myself, right? Living in India and living here and moving and teaching. And I have a book called In Our Beautiful Bones. I'll hold it up for you, which talks a lot about also my transitions and journeys from place to place. And a lot of it has to do also with racism and oppression of any kind. So I hope you will explore. My website has a lot of information on my books, and I would love to hear from you all.
Thank you so much. We will, of course, share all this information tomorrow. We'll share Zilka's website and also where you
Thank
can buy Sweet Malida on different regions,
thank
different
you.
countries, and
I hope I
also
can read some of the chat because of my
yeah,
talk. I couldn't
yeah,
read
we are
everybody's
happy to. We can
comments.
send it to you.
Yes. Please
So
contact me. I would be happy to come to your city or your synagogue or your community home. That's the way I educate and I share my work. So I would be delighted to come and teach in your college or school, or that's my life. That's what I've dedicated my life to. So I thank you, Dora and Sebastian, for this wonderful opportunity.
thank you so much for
Thanks
sharing
for
your work with
attending,
us.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will be in touch tomorrow, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day or good night, depending on where you are. And please join us for our next sessions. We'll send you also information about that. Actually, we have on Thursday about the Jews of Japan. So we are staying
Fascinating.
in Asia.
Wonderful.
Uh,
Wonderful.
thank you, everyone, and have a
Thanks so
wonderful
much.
rest of the day. Thank you, Zilka.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.